The boardroom went silent as the quarterly earnings presentation continued. My throat tightened, each breath becoming harder as I watched the man I'd respected for years dismantle my dignity pixel by pixel. Each slide, my slide, flashed across the screen as Brent, our CEO, gestured confidently. "This workflow redesign will revolutionize our production capabilities," he announced to the executive team. "I've identified inefficiencies no one else caught." My fingernails dug crescents into my palms. Those were my insights, my innovations, my late nights and early mornings, my team's sacrifice of weekends and family time. "The projections show a 26% reduction in operational costs," he continued, pointing to graphs I had meticulously created. "My vision here is to implement these changes by next quarter." Around me, executives nodded appreciatively, scribbling notes. Beside me, Louisa, my most talented analyst, stared at her lap, jaw clenched tight. None of my team received acknowledgement. Not a single mention. Not even a casual gesture toward our department. When Brent revealed the implementation timeline, panic rose in my chest. He'd compressed critical testing phases, eliminated safety protocols, and doubled down on the most experimental aspects of my proposal. This wasn't just theft, it was sabotage. After the meeting, I cornered him in the hallway. "Brent, that was my strategy, my team's work. You presented it as yours, and changed key safety components that..." His easy smile vanished. "Marlowe, let's be realistic. The board doesn't respond to suggestions from middle management, especially not from women. I did what was necessary to get your ideas approved." His voice dropped. "Be grateful I'm implementing them at all. But the changes you made are improvements. Your cautious approach would take too long." He straightened his tie. "This is business, not a university research project. We need bold action. Those safety protocols aren't optional. Without proper testing, the new system could..." "Enough." His whisper carried more threat than a shout. "Remember your position here. Challenge me publicly, and I guarantee no company in this sector will touch your resume. The industry respects decisive leadership, not complainers who can't play as team members." I walked away, trembling not from fear but from rage, so pure it burned. If you're watching this and have ever had your work stolen, your wisdom discounted, or your warnings ignored, hit like now. Subscribe to hear how this unfolded, because what happened next changed everything about my career and life. Comment below if you've experienced something similar, because this community understands what it feels like when your voice gets erased. My name is Marlowe Turner. Before this incident, colleagues described me as collaborative, brilliant with numbers, and perhaps too trusting. I headed the Operations Excellence Division at a manufacturing giant that supplied components to most major technology companies worldwide. My journey there began unconventionally. Growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, I learned resourcefulness early. While other kids got swimming lessons, I stayed home figuring out how to stretch groceries and fix broken appliances. By 16, I was handling my mother's bills and taxes, discovering a talent for spotting inefficiencies in everyday systems. After earning my degree through scholarships and night classes, I moved up quickly from junior analyst to director in just 7 years. My specialty became identifying hidden operational breakdowns that drained company resources. The project Brent stole represented 18 months of my team's work. We had analyzed every production stage, identified bottlenecks invisible to previous consultants, and designed solutions that balanced innovation with practicality. My approach had always been thorough, never rushing implementation before proper testing. 2 weeks after the presentation theft, the problems began. "These machines keep shutting down," Louisa reported, her typically calm demeanor cracking. "They're running the new protocols without the safety parameters we specified." I checked the implementation orders. "This isn't what we designed. They've skipped entire validation steps." "Brent's orders," another team member explained. "He said your timeline was unnecessarily cautious and cut it in half." That afternoon, production halted for 3 hours. The next day, 5 hours. Costs mounted instead of decreasing. Each time, my team scrambled to implement temporary fixes, while Brent rejected our requests to restore the original protocols. The situation deteriorated when quality control flagged unusually high defect rates. Clients began calling. One threatened to cancel their largest contract. Then came the morning I was uninvited from the weekly operations meeting, the meeting I typically led. "Brent wants to handle this personally," his assistant explained, avoiding my eyes. Later that day, Louisa rushed into my office, closing the door. "You need to see this." she whispered, sliding her tablet toward me. On screen was a draft presentation titled Q3 Course Correction, Addressing Implementation Failures. My stomach hollowed as I scrolled through slides showing altered versions of my original projections and numbers manipulated to make my forecasts appear wildly optimistic. The conclusion slide stated, "Leadership change needed in operations excellence to salvage the initiative." "He's setting you up," Louisa said, "making it look like your analysis caused this mess." For 3 days, I barely slept. I watched as colleagues began avoiding me, heard whispers, "Stop," when I entered rooms. My career was unraveling based on a twisted version of my own work. Then came the email summoning me to the upcoming board meeting where investors would review the failing implementation. The message specified I should attend to answer questions as needed, with all communication funneled through Brent. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by printouts of my original analysis, emails, meeting notes, everything, documenting the project's true history. The question wasn't whether I'd been wronged, but what I could possibly do about it. Power dynamics weren't in my favor. Brent had cultivated relationships with board members for years. I was just a director whose name they might vaguely recognize. Confronting him directly would likely end with my termination. Then I noticed something in my original project files, something that sparked an idea so simple yet potentially devastating that I felt a surge of adrenaline just considering it. For the next week, I arrived at work before dawn and left well after midnight. I told my team I was preparing for the board meeting, but only Louisa knew what I was really assembling. 2 presentations, identical in design and structure, different in content. The first, the one Brent would review and approve, contained exactly the narrative he wanted. My team's flawed analysis, his heroic intervention, and his strategy for recovery. The second held the unvarnished truth. Original projections alongside actual implementation directives, meeting minutes showing when critical changes were made, and every email where my team had warned of exactly the problems that eventually occurred. The morning of the board meeting arrived. Investors had flown in, concerned about mounting costs and missed targets. Brent requested a final review of the presentation I would display. "Looking good," he said, flipping through the slides on my laptop. Then he paused, eyes narrowing at something on screen. "What's this other file? Board presentation? Complete?" "Just my working version with notes," I replied smoothly. "The one you're reviewing is final." He clicked on it anyway, opening a complex flowchart detailing every decision point where his implementation had diverged from my recommendation, with resulting cost impacts. "Delete this immediately," he hissed, checking to ensure no one nearby could hear. "That makes us look terrible. Delete it now, before anyone sees it." I nodded calmly, opened my file manager, and navigated through a labyrinth of folders. I selected a presentation file and deleted it as he watched. "It's gone," I confirmed. He exhaled, patting my shoulder. "Good. Remember, just answer questions when I call on you. Otherwise, stay quiet." As he walked away to greet arriving board members, I touched my laptop bag where a small portable drive rested in the inner pocket. The question was no longer what I would do, but whether I had the courage to do it. The boardroom filled. Investors took their seats. Brent stood confidently at the head of the table, ready to begin his performance. "Before we start," the lead investor interrupted, "I'd like to understand why we're seeing such divergent results from the projections presented last quarter." Brent smiled reassuringly. "That's exactly what today's presentation addresses. We've identified the issues and have solutions ready." He nodded to me. I connected my laptop to the projector and opened the presentation file. The title slide appeared, Operations Excellence Initiative, Projection versus Reality Analysis. Brent clicked to advance to the next slide, ready to begin his narrative about my failures. What appeared instead made him freeze mid-gesture. The screen displayed side-by-side comparisons of my original workflow design and the altered version Brent had implemented. Each deviation was highlighted in red, with corresponding impacts on production timelines and costs tracked beside them. "This isn't," Brent stammered, clicking frantically to advance to the next slide. The second slide was worse. It showed email threads where my team had explicitly warned about the exact failures that later occurred, with Brent's dismissive responses attached. The third slide displayed meeting minutes showing when and how safety protocols had been eliminated, each instance marked with Brent's electronic signature. His complexion shifted from confident pink to ashen gray. "There's been a mistake with the files," he announced, lunging toward my laptop. The lead investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Valencia, held up one manicured hand. I'd actually like to see the rest of this presentation. It directly addresses my question about the divergence between projections and results. Brent's hand froze mid-reach. Around the table, board members leaned forward, suddenly alert. For the next 40 minutes, I advanced through slides documenting every decision point where Brent had overridden my team's recommendations. I narrated in a measured, factual tone, presenting evidence rather than accusations. The room temperature seemed to drop with each revelation. By slide 15, 2 board members were furiously taking notes. By slide 20, investors were exchanging meaningful glances. By slide 25, Brent had stopped attempting to interrupt. The final slide showed the original cost-saving projections beside current losses, with a simple statement: recommendation, return to original implementation plan with proper testing protocols. The board chair, a silver-haired veteran named Elliot, removed his glasses slowly. Marlowe, when did you prepare this presentation? Last week, sir. And did Brent review this content before today? He reviewed a different version. I paused, allowing my expression to show appropriate concern. Confusion about which file was to be presented. Brent finally found his voice. This is completely inappropriate. Turner has manipulated this information to undermine. These appear to be your emails and authorizations, Valencia interrupted, pointing to the screen. Are you suggesting they're fabricated? The room felt charged with tension as Brent looked around, finding no allies in the stony faces surrounding him. I think, Elliot said finally, we should continue this discussion without our CEO present. Brent's face contorted. You can't. Actually, we can, Valencia stated flatly. This presentation raises serious governance concerns. She turned to the company's legal counsel, who sat quietly in the corner. Would you please arrange for security to escort Mr. Sullivan out and ensure his access credentials are suspended pending investigation? As 2 security personnel appeared at the doorway, Brent turned to me with raw hatred. You planned this, he hissed. I met his gaze steadily. Wrong presentation, I whispered. My mistake. After Brent's departure, the real questioning began. For hours, the board and investors dissected every aspect of the project's history. I answered truthfully, providing additional documentation when requested. By meeting's end, I'd been tasked with implementing an immediate return to the original protocols. We'll need daily updates, Elliot instructed as we concluded. And Marlowe, this should have come to the board sooner. I nodded, accepting both the opportunity and the gentle admonishment. Victory felt hollow as I packed up my materials, knowing the coming weeks would demand even more from my already exhausted team. When I reached my office, Louisa waited inside, perched anxiously on the edge of a chair. Well? She asked, rising as I entered. Brent's gone. We're implementing the original plan. Her shoulders dropped in relief. About time. But, her eyes narrowed. How bad will the fallout be? I sank into my chair, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. Significant. We've lost 3 major clients already. Production is weeks behind schedule. And the board isn't exactly thrilled that I waited this long to speak up. You couldn't have done it sooner, she argued. Not without. Without proof so overwhelming they couldn't ignore it? I know. I rubbed my temples. But we're still standing in the ruins of what should have been our division's greatest achievement. That evening, alone in my apartment, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if the victory had come too late. My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. The next morning, walking into the building felt surreal. Colleagues who had avoided eye contact for weeks now nodded respectfully. My team moved with renewed energy, already implementing the restoration of original protocols. Then came the unscheduled visit from Human Resources. We need to discuss the transition, explained Helena, the HR director, closing my office door. With Brent's departure, someone needs to temporarily manage his responsibilities. Temporarily? Until a replacement is found. She pushed a stack of forms across my desk. The board has appointed you as Interim Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. I stared at the papers. Interim. It's an opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities, she said carefully. Though, I should mention several board members have expressed concern about your approach to conflict resolution. The message was clear. I'd won the battle, but not necessarily the war. That afternoon, examining Brent's files during the handover, I discovered the extent of the damage. Beyond the production issues, he'd cultivated toxic relationships with key industry partners, promising impossible deliverables and blaming internal teams when those promises fell through. He set booby traps everywhere, Louisa observed as we worked late into the night assessing the situation. It's almost impressive how thoroughly he undermined every system. While maintaining the appearance of success, I added, look at these quarterly reports. All technically true, but fundamentally misleading. The problems weren't confined to my division. Brent had created a corporate culture where departments competed rather than collaborated, where blame flowed downward and credit upward, where short-term appearances mattered more than sustainable outcomes. 2 days into my interim role, I received a call from Valencia. The board is concerned about the extent of the issues you're uncovering, she said without preamble. Some members are suggesting we should have appointed someone with more executive experience. Someone less likely to air the company's dirty laundry? I asked. Her pause confirmed my suspicion. Trust is difficult in these situations. Many wonder why you didn't speak up earlier if things were so problematic. Because I lacked the position and proof to be heard, I replied. As you've now seen firsthand. Regardless, we need stabilization before our next earnings call. 3 weeks. Can you deliver that? 3 weeks to reverse months of systematic damage. I'll need resources and authority. You'll have both, she promised. But Marlo, results matter more than how we got here. The past won't help our stock price recover. As soon as she hung up, I called an emergency meeting with all department heads. Many were skeptical of my temporary authority, particularly the men who'd been part of Brent's inner circle. We don't have time for territorial disputes, I announced, standing at the head of the conference room. Every division needs to provide complete transparency on current projects, challenges, and workarounds by tomorrow morning. That's not feasible, objected Dominic, the marketing director who'd always been Brent's strongest ally. Some projects are sensitive. Everything is sensitive when a company is bleeding money, I countered. Either we address reality together, or we'll continue failing separately. The room divided visibly, those willing to cooperate, and those resistant to my leadership. It was the first of many such divisions over the coming days. Meanwhile, strange things began happening. My access to certain financial files was mysteriously revoked. Meetings were rescheduled without my knowledge. Rumors circulated that my presentation had been an elaborate setup to seize Brent's position. Then came the anonymous email to the entire executive team. Ask Marlo about her previous employment and why she really left. I stared at my screen, heart pounding. My departure from my previous company had involved a similar situation, a superior taking credit for my work, but my response had been less calculated. I'd resigned impulsively, burning bridges in the process. The official record showed I'd left under a cloud of communication issues and insubordination. The email was clearly Brent's doing, an attempt to discredit me by surfacing half-truths from my past. That evening, Elliot called. We've received concerning information about your employment history, he began without greeting. You didn't disclose certain details during your original hiring process. I disclosed everything required, I replied carefully. If you have specific questions, the board is reconsidering your interim appointment. We'll need you to come in tomorrow morning for a formal discussion. After hanging up, I sat motionless in my darkened office. Everything I'd worked to rebuild was threatening to collapse again. The familiar burning sensation of injustice rose in my throat. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Louisa entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Bad news travels fast, she said, setting 1 cup before me. The executive floor is buzzing about tomorrow's meeting. Brent had more allies than we realized. She perched on the edge of my desk. What's the plan? I almost laughed. I don't have one. Not this time. She studied my face. Not true. I know that look. I stared into my coffee. The truth was, an idea had been forming, a dangerous one. Since discovering the extent of Brent's manipulations, I'd been quietly gathering information, following digital breadcrumbs through the company's systems. What I'd found went beyond mere credit stealing or mismanagement. Louisa, I said slowly, how much do you know about the acquisition of Terra Green Industries last year? She frowned. The sustainability company? Not much. Brent championed it as his signature achievement. Why? Because I've found some irregularities in the transaction records. And if what I suspect is true, I hesitated, weighing the implications. If I'm right, tomorrow's meeting won't go the way the board expects. What are you planning? I closed my laptop decisively. Something I should have done from the beginning. But I need your help tonight. As we worked through the darkened office, piecing together fragments of information from across multiple systems, the full picture slowly emerged. By dawn, we had assembled something far more devastating than my original presentation. The question wasn't whether to use it, but whether I was willing to face the consequences of doing so. When I walked into the boardroom at precisely 8 a.m., the atmosphere was frigid. Board members and executives sat in grim formation, with Valencia and Elliot at the center. A stranger in an expensive suit sat beside them, likely legal representation. Marlowe, Elliot began severely. Before we address the concerns about your past employment, do you have anything you wish to state for the record? I placed my laptop on the table and met his gaze steadily. Actually, I said, connecting to the projector, I do have something to show you all. The screen illuminated with a simple title, Terra Green Acquisition, Complete Financial Analysis. The room shifted uncomfortably. I was asked to stabilize operations, I explained calmly. That required understanding all major financial decisions affecting our current position. Valencia leaned forward. This meeting isn't about Terra Green. We're here to discuss my employment history. Yes, I'm aware, but I believe this information takes precedence. I clicked to the next slide, displaying a timeline of the acquisition process. Terra Green was purchased for $340 million last year, our largest acquisition to date. Brent presented it as an innovative sustainability company with proprietary technology that would revolutionize our manufacturing processes. Elliot's expression hardened. We're all familiar with the acquisition. Are you familiar with this? I advanced to a slide showing financial transfers occurring 2 days before the acquisition announcement. 3 separate payments totaling $4.2 million from our Innovation Development Fund to an offshore account registered to a company called Viridian Holdings. The corporate lawyer straightened in his chair. Viridian Holdings, I continued, was established 3 weeks before these transfers. Its sole director is Amara Sullivan. I paused. Brent's sister. Murmurs rippled around the table. This could be coincidental, I acknowledged. Except for this. The next slide showed technical evaluations of Terra Green's supposedly revolutionary technology, evaluations dated months before the acquisition but never presented to the board. These assessments, conducted by our own engineering team, concluded that Terra Green's technology was fundamentally flawed and unlikely to ever achieve commercial viability. Dominic, Brent's ally, interjected sharply. Where did you access these files? This looks like unauthorized. They were in the archived engineering reports, accessible to anyone with C-level credentials, I replied smoothly. Which I now have. Valencia's expression had shifted from dismissive to intensely focused. The next slides methodically revealed the deception, how Brent had commissioned a second, favorable assessment from consultants who never actually tested the technology, how he'd suppressed the original negative evaluation, how he'd fast-tracked the acquisition while bypassing standard due diligence procedures. Most concerning, I said, advancing to what I considered the smoking gun, is this communication between Brent and Terra Green's former CEO. The screen displayed messages where Brent outlined exactly how to position the company's failing technology to appear revolutionary. Why would our CEO coach the seller on how to inflate the value of their company? I asked rhetorically. The board chair removed his glasses. These are serious allegations. They're documented facts, I corrected gently, and they explain why Brent was so desperate to control the narrative around the operations failures. The integration of Terra Green's non-viable technology was causing production issues that had nothing to do with my team's workflow redesign. The corporate lawyer whispered something to Elliot, who nodded gravely. What exactly are you suggesting happened here, Marlowe? Valencia asked, her voice carefully neutral. I'm not suggesting anything. The financial records show that Brent facilitated the purchase of a essentially worthless company at an inflated price after directing company funds to his sister's newly established business. The engineering reports show he knowingly misrepresented the technology's viability to this board. And when the inevitable technical failures began affecting production, he systematically blamed my department to cover the true cause. Silence enveloped the room. The executive team exchanged uncomfortable glances. If you doubt any of this, I added, I've prepared a complete digital package with all supporting documentation. I've also taken the liberty of analyzing how we might mitigate the damage moving forward. I clicked to my final slide, recommended actions, independent audit, legal review of acquisition terms, technology replacement strategy, transparent shareholder communication. The board chair cleared his throat. We'll need to verify all this independently. Of course, I disconnected my laptop. I anticipated that response. I reached into my bag and retrieved a sealed envelope. This contains access credentials to a secure server where I've uploaded all evidence, organized chronologically with an index. The server automatically logs all access attempts, so there will be a record of who reviews what and when. I placed the envelope on the table and stood. Now, shall we discuss my employment history, or would you prefer to address the apparent fraud that's costing shareholders millions? The meeting that followed lasted 7 hours. External auditors were called in immediately. The corporate lawyer made several anxious phone calls. Security personnel escorted 3 of Brent's closest allies, including Dominic, from the building by mid-afternoon. As evening approached, Elliot asked everyone except the board members and myself to leave the room. "Your handling of this situation has been unorthodox," he stated once we were alone. "The situation itself was unorthodox," I responded. Valencia studied me with new respect. "You could have brought this information forward immediately after Brent's removal. Why wait until your position was threatened? Would you have believed me without verification? Or would it have seemed like a vindictive attack on Brent after taking his job?" I met her gaze steadily. "I needed time to gather conclusive evidence." "And the matter of your previous employment?" another board member asked. "I left my former company after experiencing similar credit theft by a superior," I acknowledged. "I resigned abruptly and spoke my mind unprofessionally during exit interviews. It was early in my career, and I handled it poorly. I learned from that experience." Elliot leaned back. Evidently, the board conferred briefly in hushed tones before Valencia addressed me again. "We need to manage this situation carefully to minimize shareholder impact. The interim position we offered you has expanded in scope. We would like you to assume the role of acting CEO while we conduct a proper search process." Her expression became pointed. "You will, of course, be a candidate for the permanent position if you're interested." "I am," I replied simply. "The compensation package will be adjusted accordingly," Elliot added. "And Marlowe, the board expects complete transparency moving forward." "That works both ways," I responded. 2 weeks later, I stood before the company's employees in the main auditorium, addressing them as their new leader. The official announcement had described Brent's departure as a resignation following strategic disagreements. The Terra Green situation had been characterized as an acquisition reassessment, requiring write-downs. The full extent of what had occurred remained confidential, while legal proceedings against Brent progressed quietly. "Our path forward requires honesty about where we stand," I told the assembled staff. "Production issues will not resolve overnight. Client relationships need rebuilding. Trust, both internal and external, must be restored." I outlined my vision for reorganizing departments to foster collaboration rather than competition. I announced the promotion of key team members, including Luisa, who had demonstrated integrity during difficult times. "Success isn't measured by who gets credit," I concluded. "It's measured by what we accomplish together." The applause that followed felt like the beginning of healing. Later that evening, as I packed up my belongings to move into the CEO office, a notification appeared on my phone, a message from an unknown number. "You won't last 6 months. The board will replace you as soon as the crisis passes." They always do. I recognized Brent's texting style immediately. Rather than responding, I took a screenshot and forwarded it to the company's legal team with a brief note for the file on ongoing harassment. Then I silenced my phone and continued packing. The corner office awaited, but so did greater challenges. The company's reputation had suffered. Several clients remained hesitant to renew contracts. The stock price had stabilized but not recovered. The real work was just beginning. 6 months passed in a blur of 18-hour days, difficult decisions, and gradual improvements. We discontinued the integration of Terra Green's flawed technology, taking the financial hit up front, rather than prolonging the inevitable. We rebuilt production systems according to my original design, with proper testing protocols. We reorganized departments to eliminate the silos Brent had created. Most importantly, we established new governance structures, ensuring no single executive could bypass critical checks and balances. The board extended my appointment for another 6 months, then removed acting from my title entirely. The day that announcement went public, I received a small package at my office. Inside was a flash drive, unlabeled, with no note. My security team analyzed it before I viewed the contents. A video file of Brent, clearly intoxicated, ranting to someone off camera. "She thinks she's won," he slurred. "But Turner doesn't understand how this works. The board used her to clean up the mess, but they'll discard her once she's served her purpose. They always protect their own." I watched the video twice, then permanently deleted it. Whatever revenge Brent had hoped to achieve by sending it had failed. The man no longer had power over me or anyone at the company. 1 year after the fateful board presentation, I stood on a different stage accepting an industry leadership award. The citation praised the company's remarkable turnaround and commitment to transparent governance. As I surveyed the audience, I spotted Valencia among the attendees, nodding appreciatively. Beside her sat Luisa, now my chief operating officer. And in the back row, barely visible, a familiar face watched with undisguised bitterness. Brent, now working for a smaller competitor in a diminished role. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The best revenge wasn't the momentary satisfaction of his removal, or even my ascension. The true victory was creating something he could never build, a company based on integrity, collaboration, and shared success. The revenge wasn't in destroying him. It was in rebuilding everything better than he could have imagined, and ensuring he would witness it from the sidelines. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more authentic workplace stories. Have you ever had your work stolen or been underestimated professionally? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters, and this community understands what it means to fight for recognition in spaces where others try to dim your light. Remember, sometimes the most powerful move isn't a dramatic confrontation, but the quiet excellence that proves exactly why they should have never underestimated you in the first place.